You're at your old trusty boat. You call mighty sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we hear stories from everyday people who do extraordinary things. I'm your host, Jerome Rand. Hey everybody, so real quick with this podcast, I got to sit down with Mason Gravely, who runs the Adventure Sports podcast. He's bicycled from Alaska down to Florida. He's done a lot of cool stuff, and this was a chance for two podcasters to sit down and just have a great chat. So definitely check out, if you like adventure stories, his podcast is absolutely huge. Again, it's the Adventure Sports podcast, so give that a listen if you like to hear from adventurers all over the world. But here we go. This is part one.
I'm recording now.
Nice. We are live.
Yeah. Jerome, welcome to the Adventure Sports podcast again.
Thank you, Mason. I could almost say welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast.
That's right. Yeah, we could just exchange. Yeah, we can share this.
It's
we can
dueling
share this.
podcast interviewers interviewing each other.
You're interviewing me. I'm interviewing you. But yeah, man, what are you doing in St. Pete right now?
Well, just down here trying to spend a little time away from the cold up north and visit some family that live down here. My mom is down here on a little 2-week hiatus from that blistering cold up in northern Michigan. So,
oh my gosh! Now I can't. Are you from Boston? Not Boston, but
My
Massachusetts originally.
Yeah, my dad's side of the family are all from Boston, and then my mom's side are all from Indiana. So they met up, and then Michigan was the place they went. So
nice, man. Oh wow,
yeah, it's not too bad. Yeah, I've always, when we were kids, my grandparents had a little house out in Gloucester, and that was where the whole Gloucester thing of leaving on the big trip came from. But I used to spend like all my days out there looking through the tide pools, trying to find crabs, all sorts of stuff. It was paradise as a young man.
Yeah, no kidding, man. This is, and folks are going through some cold weather right now, but it's a beautiful day here.
Yeah, I don't know if we should brag about it, but it's probably 78 degrees sunny, and
it's perfect. It really, I was driving along the beach here in the water, and it was, dude, it looked like my shirt.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like we're in the Caribbean, man. But you know more about that than I do.
Yeah,
you live down there.
I've been pretty spoiled. Spent about nine years down in the British Virgin Islands, and to be able to wake up every day and look out at that was pretty spectacular. And it makes doing anything else hard, because as a sailor down there, the trade winds just blow and blow, and it's perfect. And then I would go back to northern Michigan for a month or so during hurricane season. There's a beautiful lake up there and zero wind. And every day I'd be like, we can't even go sailing. There's no wind.
Jeez. You got spoiled down there.
I got definitely spoiled. I was very, very lucky. And that, honestly, the best part about being down there was the people. It's just such an amazing culture of just sort of family-oriented neighbors, know all the neighbors, and, everybody's just trying to enjoy their time, here on the planet.
Wow. A little more in the moment living, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think, and I've heard them say a lot of times, is just, we already live in paradise. We're just trying to enjoy it.
Wow. Yeah. What are you trying to get to from there?
Yeah, exactly.
Life,
Exactly. So.
That's cool, man. So, yeah, are you going to try to get down there anytime soon, or do you try to go back down, or is that just kind of?
I'd love to. They're still rebuilding the Bitter End Yacht Club where I used to work, and that's I think they're going to try to open up, maybe open up sometime either this summer. I'm not sure. I need to chat with their ownership and see what's going on and what the updates are. I don't know. I would love to go back down there. It's such a spectacular place, but I'd like to go down there on the boat too and just keep cruising. I don't know. It's one of those things where you can get sucked into it and then you never return.
Right.
Yeah, because there's a lot of opportunities in the Caribbean as well, and if you're a sailor
like what
and stuff. There's just all sorts of little jobs where you can get hooked into either jobs on boats that are coming in for the season and then going to the Med, or actually living there and working at like one of the resorts and things like that. And I don't know, it's pretty cool, but it's party time down there as well. You know, that's one of the tricky things. Some people get down there and they can't handle it. There's too much freedom. You can pretty much do what you want. And I remember when I first did a delivery to St. Thomas, this was back maybe 2004 or 5. And one of the guys who had spent a lot of time down there, it was my first time, he said, "Listen, man, if you can stay sober until noon, you're going to do all right down here." And I was like, I didn't really understand what he meant, but now I kind of do. Because it's just, everybody that's visiting down there is there for the party, and it infects everybody else.
Yeah. How would you get out of that? Because you're trying to perpetuate that. You don't want to. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to like cram someone's vacation time, so you gotta kind of have to be. You
want to be like, "Hey guys, let's get up tomorrow 6 a.m. Let's do some calisthenics." What do you say? No, it's like, let's stay up late, let's party, let's dance, all that sort of stuff. Man. But it is fun, and I spent the better part of my 30s down there, and that was pretty perfect. I don't know if I could do it again, but I have a feeling I'll end up down there at some point.
It's a time. It's a time of your life. It's gone though for now. But where's your boat?
Right now, Sparrow is up in South Carolina. So I typically go and if I'm not doing some big adventure, I'll end up, in Maine in the summer, where I work in the boat yard that I haul the boat out, and then I can do the big repair jobs. And then right after the hurricane season, I'll head down either to the Caribbean or go. This is the second season I've been down in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Oh, nice.
So,
how'd you end up there?
Just a recommendation from a buddy of mine who had worked there. Is a small little marina way, like 25 miles up the river, quiet, really protected, which is what I sort of look for. There's a lot of marinas where if it's in the wrong position, you get the wrong wind coming out during the day. All of a sudden, you've got like 2-foot waves bouncing you around on the dock. And the place I'm at doesn't have any of that. It's perfect. Yeah.
I've been to Beaufort once.
Oh, really?
I was bike touring up the East Coast.
Oh,
Let me tell a story real fast. And I met this other cyclist. This dude, he was actually in a group, and we just started talking. I was bike packing, just going up the coast, and telling him about what I was doing. And he's like, "Oh, you should totally come hang out at our house tonight." Mm-hmm. We're huge cyclists. We love, visitors, whatnot.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've got another like hour and a half for my ride with my group, but why don't you, because we're only like 5 miles away, why don't you just go ahead and go over there and hang out at my house? And he's like, "My wife's not home yet." And he was kind of like looking around like, and he pulled out of his jersey, like, "Here's just my keys.
Yeah.
Go to my house, hang out. There's a TV." He just gave me the keys to his house.
Wow.
The code to his gate. I mean, it was a beautiful home right on the water.
Oh, really?
Intercoastal Beaufort. He's a doctor. Had this giant jersey signed by Lance Armstrong, like from the Tour de France, on the wall.
Oh, so like he was a fanatic.
Oh, he was a fanatic, but super wealthy. And I walked in and his dogs were there, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. So I just hung out on the back porch the whole time. I didn't feel right just sitting in his house. Yeah. And sure enough, like an hour later, he comes home, and we just hang out, eat dinner, and go to bed, get up the next day, and ride away. But it was a cool experience.
Southern hospitality is a very real thing.
It was a beautiful place too.
Yeah,
beautiful place.
Oh, there's some absolutely spectacular old mansions that are all along. Yeah. And I think the house from that movie, The Big Chill, is down there.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure there's
like a street in there.
I think so. Yeah.
Gets in a lot of films, they were talking about a street.
I don't think the proper name for the bridge, the Ladies Island Bridge, I think is one that's featured in Forrest Gump, and then also the bench he sits on. I think that's down.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, that's ringing a bell now. It's right around.
There's a lot of little chocolate shops,
There you go.
It's sort of modeled around it. And there's a shrimp company and stuff. I had a buddy of mine who was working for him. I don't know. It's a really nice place. I mean, it's beautiful, but right now, at least for the last week before I got down here, it was 40 degrees and it rained for I think 5 days straight. It was reminiscent of being in Maine on the Appalachian Trail, actually. Just
Dang.
Like, it won't stop. Why? Yeah. How is it still raining?
Speaking of Forrest Gump, man, you're like a Forrest Gump on the water. You just
I was just
jumping
sailing.
All these. I just went sailing.
I'm going sailing.
I'm done now. I'm done.
Well, and honestly, I was talking with the guys from the MS Foundation or the MS Society, and I raised money on this last trip. I've got a buddy of mine, a good friend, who was diagnosed when I was on my big trip around the world. And so when I got back, I went to visit him, got the news, all that sort of stuff. And long story short, I was chatting with him yesterday, and it got me thinking, and I want to do this crazy trip. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But I've always thought about that whole Forrest Gump thing about running across the country, but I don't think I could just jump right into anything like that. But I was thinking Michigan, I could run from the border of Indiana and run all the way up to the Mackinac Bridge. It's like, if you take the coast road, it'd probably be 350, 400 miles.
Oh yeah.
You think that would be pretty
That'd be awesome.
Do you think I could actually do it? That would be the question.
Do I think you can do it? What do you? This is the Adventure Sports Podcast.
Yeah, man. Well, true. Yeah.
There's nothing you really can't do.
Might as well try it. I suppose,
right. No,
right?
I think that's a cool idea.
Something like that.
Why? Well, tell me this. Why would you want to?
Well, I think it would help curb this idea that I have that I want to run across the U.S. from. The idea would be to go from San Francisco to Boston. And in my crazy brain, I had the thinking of like, well, time it so that I get to Boston for the Boston Marathon.
Oh, man.
And then I can run that. And who knows, maybe I'll be in such good shape I'll win it.
Right. There you go. There you go.
You can see how my brain doesn't really, it has these grand plans. And sometimes I have to damper them down. But boy,
Well, you've done a lot of this stuff too. That's the thing.
Yeah. Well, the AT, that was, obviously I'm not running, but you're still putting down 20 to 30 miles in a day. You're carrying 30 pounds on your back, all that
Getting
stuff.
Rained on day after day.
Yeah.
It's got to be the hardest part mentally.
Oh, I have a picture of I took it like over my head, and I had literally my entire lower back and the top of my butt was just completely red, almost to the bleeding point from rubbing against my pack for 2 or 3 days in a row in the rain. And,
oh, geez.
Talk about a stinger. Oof, that was pretty bad.
Dang. So, man, I'd tell you this. I don't know if you know this, but I did a cross-country bike ride last summer. It was a guided trip, though.
Oh, wait. So this is this...
This was with who I work for, Athletic Brewing.
Okay.
They opened. We have a brewery in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And they wanted to open up one, they opened up one in San Diego. So it was literally on each ocean.
Yeah.
East Coast and West Coast. And we were just brainstorming, like, how do we celebrate this in the Athletic Brewing way? And the idea came around, and obviously I wanted to be like, let's just bike. Let's bike from one to the other. But one of the other guys brought it up, and they were like, is that possible? And I'm like, heck yeah, that's possible. We can totally do that. So
let me tell you about the time I rode from Alaska to Florida.
No, man, it was a huge team effort. And but we met a guy in Denver. Gosh, his name was Jason. And he had just got done running across the U.S. I think he was 50.
Yeah.
And he might have not been quite that old, but he wasn't 20, 25. He was older, or he was and he's legally blind.
Wow.
And he ran 50 miles a day, every day, not a single day off. And we just randomly ran into him on this trip. And his mom was helping him because he was trying to run like 50 miles that day around this park, just around like this 2-mile loop. So we really started talking to her, his mom. But she was the one that accompanied him the whole way. They just slept in their like SUV right in the back. Mom and son, she did everything for him. She got the food ready.
Yeah.
Got his whatever, all the stuff ready, and so he could run, figured out the route. And she was his whole crew. And I think it took, at 50 miles a day, what is that, like a couple months?
I would think so.
It's like 3,000 miles or so. 2 months, and that's what they did, man.
Holy cow. Yeah.
He just did it.
Having that support would be absolutely crucial, because I don't think you could really do it without
I don't think you could run. You could walk.
You could walk, yeah.
And push a cart.
Yeah,
We've had plenty of people that ultra walkers.
Right.
Angela Maxwell, one of our guests, she just finished around the world walking 6 or 7 years.
Holy
to
smokes.
like 40 countries, just like around the equator, across Australia, I'm pretty sure, all across US or Asia and Europe. And she just finished like last month.
Really?
Finished in Bend, Oregon, where she started.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. After walking across the US, she stopped in Denver, talked to my wife's classroom. It was awesome.
Well, and just thinking about the experiences that she must have seen and been through in all those years. I mean, that's a chapter of your life, you know? Oh, yeah,
like
yeah.
6 years, I think it was.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because I had thought about that too. The amount of time that I've spent on the ocean by myself is at this point probably chalks up to about 2% of my life if I live to be 100. Yeah. And it's sort of like, wow, that's a good portion right there.
That is, man. Yeah, 2%.
I better like what I'm doing.
Right, yeah. No, that's really cool. You said something on the last interview, which I'm going to, in the intro of this one, I'm going to tell folks, like, go and listen to the first one, then listen to this one, and you can kind of get the backstory. I think it was you that shared a quote like, the closest people to you sometimes were the astronauts at the space station.
Yeah,
Did you say that?
Yeah.
That was one of the most profound things I'd ever heard.
It's a thinker, you start picturing that in your head. And to tell you the truth, I mean, a lot of the time I was out there, it was like that. It's just in the Southern Ocean, you're probably 10 or 20 times farther or closer to those guys than you are to anybody else.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, because I think the space station is about 200 something miles up.
Yeah. You don't think about that, but it's not that high.
It's not that far away. Yeah. But down there, especially in the Pacific, when you get close to Point Nemo, you have about 1,600 miles is the radius of empty ocean. It's the biggest open expanse on the planet, and I think that equates to about 8.8 million square miles.
No way.
Empty sea.
Something that I've been saying a lot, or someone told me and been realizing and thinking about a lot, is the ocean is the world's greatest wilderness.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't get talked about. It's like, oh, the mountains of whatever, or, Siberia or somewhere in Alaska or northern Canada. It's like, yeah, those places are remote, but the ocean is really where it's not even an option to live out there unless you're, on a boat like you, but even still, it's so contained. You're not going to homestead the ocean.
And I mean, you can't be out there without some sort of vessel.
Right.
It's not like you can just be like, I'm going to go swim around the world real quick.
Right,
it just doesn't.
You can't do that.
You can't, as a human, you can't live. It's a very hostile environment.
It's crazy, man.
To try and live. Yeah. But I think you can fit all of the land masses on the planet in the Pacific Ocean with room to spare. And that's just the Pacific. You still have the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic and all that. So,
gosh,
it's massive.
So, I'm not totally clear on what this last trip was.
And the debacle.
I remember following along, and I believe it was your mom that was posting updates.
Yeah. I sort of upped the game a little bit as far as the social media stuff went, just, sort of learning from the first trip. And we were also raising money for the MS Society as well. So I was just trying to be a little more proactive with that, but it was still sending stuff back to my mom, and then that would get posted on Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. And so the updates were going, but it didn't go according to plan.
What was the plan?
So the plan was to leave from Maine and go north through the Northwest Passage, and then, which you can only really do during the month of August. That's the only time the ice melts enough for a boat to get through. And then you go down the Pacific Ocean around Cape Horn, and I was either going to turn north and just circumnavigate the Americas, which by itself is pretty insane. But if things were going well, the boat was good, the food was holding out, then I was going to go around Antarctica and complete the figure eight, which is like 45,000 miles or something like that. Only one person has sailed that route, a guy by the name of Randall Reeves. He stopped a handful of times going through the passage, but he's done that whole route, and he's the only person. So I was, I guess, attempting to do that without stopping. So
Oh my God.
that was the game plan, at least.
So
things didn't turn out all that well, because it's sort of a how do I describe this? The Northwest Passage is more like a speed bump than anything, because you can only go through it at a certain time. But what I was worried about is that the Canadians are starting to regulate that waterway a lot more. And even though it's a natural passage, and, you know, technically under maritime law, you can pass through as long as you don't stop. But it's since it's such a sensitive area, and with all the COVID stuff going on, they at first gave me permission to go ahead, and then 21 days into the trip, they told me I couldn't go anymore. So
how did they tell you? What was it, radio?
I had to, on this trip, I had to be a little more high tech to be able to receive updated ice charts as the ice moves around. So I had an email address that I could download really short email blasts with. And I had given them that before I left, because to go through there, one of the requirements was to check in with their sort of search and rescue guys twice a day, so that they knew exactly where I was. Because it's pretty common you get stuck in the ice, and then either an icebreaker has to come through, or if your boat gets cracked up, then they'll send a helicopter out there. That was sort of their thinking, was, you know, if things went really bad with the pandemic, that they might not have search and rescue available. I don't think it was, you know, they knew my intention was to not stop. And I don't think they were worried about me actually bringing the virus up there. Right. But it was more of, they just don't want to have to deal with some idiot who decided he wanted to go through the Northwest Passage during all this. But it was only because when they initially said, yeah, if you can fulfill these requirements, we strongly think you shouldn't do this, but you can go ahead. And from that point, it was full throttle preparations, buying everything. And because I didn't have a ton of time, but the boat was pretty much ready. I just needed to provision it and get a few things tied up. But so for 21 days, I was going to be a Arctic adventurer. And I was working my way up. I got just within a few miles of 60 degrees north, you know, halfway in between the Labrador coast and Greenland. And that was when I found out. And there was bad weather up there. I mean, it was miserable those first few weeks, just fog. And the only really cool thing was the animal life was pretty amazing. I mean, there were dolphins, porpoises, whales, and it was constant. You know, when I go out in the Atlantic, you might see that stuff every couple of days. Up there, it was every few hours, something else was popping out of the sea to come and check me out. So that was pretty cool.
Is it a calmer ocean up there?
It can be. I mean, I was finding, foggy conditions and light to no wind. But then the systems that sort of come down from Canada, they hit, you know, the U.S. And then as they come off the U.S., they turn into these storm systems and go into the North Atlantic. So those were rolling through, but they were pretty much south of me. I had to go through Iceberg Alley, which is basically all these icebergs are coming off the Labrador coast, and they get grabbed by the current, and then they go out into the North Atlantic. So you got to kind of go through there, and it's a bit worrisome. They track most of the big bergs, but the small little chunks and stuff, those are sort of all over the place.
And I can still do some
if
damage.
I hit one of those, it'd sink my boat. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh,
and here's the thing is, you think, okay, well, I won't be able to see him at night, but I'll be able to see him during the day. But then when you're chalked in by fog, and I'm talking, 100 feet, you might be able to see. So even during the day, I wouldn't be able to see a white cube come out of a white backdrop. I mean, it's like, when you go skiing, you get snow blind sometimes when the dull light. It's the same way out there. And you just have to put it out of your head and just be like, well, all right, if I hit one, I hit one. But because you can't sit on deck and just stare forward all the time. It's impossible.
So what do you do? Just take your chances?
Yeah, it's a gamble. The reports of where the ice was were coming in, and I knew if I stayed far enough to the east, I was avoiding most of the big bergs, so probably avoiding most of the small stuff. And so you just try and stay as far clear. But an iceberg that came off that coast was probably what did in the Titanic and all that, because some of the big ones last for a long time.
Oh,
they
yeah.
just get swept right out there. So that was pretty scary. I went through this nuts electrical storm that knocked out a bunch of my electrical equipment, I think like a week into the trip. So I was already on my backup.
Did you get struck by lightning? Is that
what
happened?
It was strange. Did it hit the
water? How does that work?
I don't know exactly what happened. There were bolts hitting the water. I can't really say exactly how far away they were, but it was nerve-wracking because I had so much fuel on board. I was like fully loaded. This was 1 week into the trip. And one of the things with the Northwest Passage is there's really no wind up there, so you have to motor. And so I was carrying, I think, somewhere around 1,200 gallons of diesel fuel, and the majority of which was, or not 1,200 gallons, I'm sorry. What did I have? I had 250 gallons, I think. And most of it was in this big bladder about the size of this table, so maybe the size of a normal table. And that's down below underneath my bunk. And then in the back of the boat, in the lazarette, there's 4 big tanks of propane. And I'm in this lightning storm wondering, should I be down below next to the 180 gallons of diesel fuel in that tank? Or should I be up here next to all the wires? Like it was crazy. And in the end, after about 2 or 3 days, I watched my VHF radio die, and then my little Garmin InReach died, and then the AIS, which indicates where other boats are around me, that died as well. And so I had to replace all that stuff. And I was only a week into the trip, and I'm thinking to myself, geez, this is not going how I wanted it.
So those were fried.
Yeah, they all just started malfunctioning. So I figure the only thing I can figure is that the lightning was close enough that it affected everything. And maybe I didn't I don't think I actually got a direct hit, but maybe there's one that was close enough.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a scientist out there right now that's like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what happened.
Right.
We just don't know. That's crazy to me, man. That is, did you get to see how big some of these icebergs were, like on a clear day?
Never saw a single one. And
no way.
Who knows? I could have sailed right past them and not even noticed.
You didn't get to see any ice?
No, not a single bit. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. And I kind of wanted to, when I had to do the U-turn and start going south, I had the choice, of trying to get back to Maine and just, sort of forget it all ever happened, or go and, sort of start a new adventure. And the problem with going back to Maine was that there were already hurricanes in the Atlantic, and the typical track, if they develop off of Africa, is they cruise the Caribbean and then they come up the East Coast.
Yep.
I think there were 2 named storms out there at that time. So I kind of was sort of cut off from going back to Maine. Plus all the wind is coming from there. So it would have just been an upwind slog. And I decided, well, I'll go across. And I went across the Atlantic over towards the Azores, and then kept going south, because there was part of me that figured, I've got this boat, it's all filled with food and fuel, and I have everything I need. Maybe I can salvage something and do another big trip.
So you just took a right.
Yeah, I basically
went east.
As soon as I read the email
southeast
that said I was no longer allowed to go through, and I think they put a caveat on there where they said, you can't enter until October 31st. And by October 31st, the Northwest Passage is frozen over again.
Right.
So it was kind of like, well, either they don't know what they're talking about, or, they just don't care.
Intentional.
Like, a little, hey, you can go through there. But,
you can walk across it.
So, it just did that U-turn, and I was already out there. So it's hard to sort of, I don't know, figure out what you want to do, because nothing is immediate, because you're so isolated. it's not like you can be like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. Come pick me up. That's just not happening. So you have to, I was sort of stuck between a stop sign and the possibility of doing something else. So I decided to just keep going and really, I would say trying to get into a safer position from the hurricanes was probably the biggest concern I had, because I didn't know it was going to be like one of the most active hurricane seasons on record, but the idea of just being in the Atlantic and getting pummeled by a serious hurricane that's terrifying. I mean, I've never been in a storm like that, and I don't ever want to be, but
jeez,
to be in the Atlantic at that time, it's you're really playing with fire. So as you head further east over to the Azores and over to Europe and stuff, then you're sort of out of that zone where the storms,
because it's happening down in Africa, down like which part of Africa?
Well, they'll develop by the Cape Verde Islands, which is off the coast of like Liberia and all those areas on the western coast, and then they'll build as they go across the Atlantic towards the Caribbean, and then eventually they turn north and typically go right up our coastline,
right by this house.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Have you ever had to been down here with hurricanes?
Well, I grew up here.
Oh, okay.
My whole life.
Yeah.
And
so you've seen
my wife too. So yeah, we had plenty of.
Which one was the worst, Andrew or Hugo?
No, there was one year, I think 2004. In our little town in Central Florida, we had 3 pretty major storms, big ones like Category 3 and 4.
They come out of the Gulf?
Yeah, they come out of the Gulf. Yeah. No, they come from the Atlantic, but 3 crossed our town. We went through 3 different eyes.
Oh, jeez!
In a month and a half.
Wow.
All the same season.
Yeah,
and it was crazy, man. It was. We lived on a big piece of property and lost dozens and dozens of like 100-year-old oak trees. I had a limb through my bedroom, cars getting turned over. It was, one right after the other. We didn't have power for like, all told, like a month and something. Yeah. So it was, we filled it. We had a swimming pool that we were getting water out of. We were killing animals to eat them. It was crazy.
Wow.
It wasn't that crazy.
Survival.
Like it was, but it was spaced out enough where it wasn't a month straight of losing power. I think
right.
Somebody here.
Oh, he's the
pool dude.
The pool guy. I don't think he'll be making
no problem. He's probably like, what the heck is going on in here? Dude's having a conversation.
Yeah, right. We're just podcasting.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. All right, this is your brother and sister-in-law's house.
Yep.
Well, this is by all accounts, quote, you know what I mean by this, normal life.
Normal.
What do the people around you think about the way you live and what you choose to do with your life?
Well, honestly, I typically get 2 different reactions. One reaction is that people are just amazed and they sort of wish they did more things like that. Maybe not to the degree that I do them, but wish they had time to experience some of these things rather than just doing their sort of 9-to-5 regular, quote unquote, regular life. And then other people are just like, you're absolutely crazy. Why would you want to even do any of that stuff? It sounds miserable. I've had people read the book and say, like, why would you ever want to do something like that again? That sounds just awful. And, I don't know. I think that was one of the topics I sort of wanted to talk to you about, because you sort of know, you've talked to enough people that have done crazy things, and you've done enough
I've done a little to know like those bigger, like those bigger themes, and talk to enough people like you to really understand why.
Well, that's the question. It's one word. Why? Why do it? And I think about that a lot, because I get that question so much that it's hard to come up with a good explanation. I mean, what did Sir Edmund Hillary, what did he say? Because it's there.
Yeah.
Why he climbed Everest.
That's a famous reason.
Why did I say around the world? Because it's there. There. See, I can't pull that card.
It's already taken.
Yeah, it's already taken. But I don't know. I think some of the stuff for me, and I'd ask you this, but just being out in nature for extended periods of time is attractive to me. I think I change after 2, 3, 4 days of not being indoors at all, having to, if it's hot outside, I'm hot. If it's cold outside, I'm cold. There's no regulating any of it. You sort of have to go with the flow. And there's something in that, I think, that is really appealing for me. I've always enjoyed that. And it's to my own detriment because, there's a lot of times I'm just sitting there in the pouring rain, just thinking to myself, man, this really sucks.
This is fun. This is the way I choose. Man, I tell you what's crazy is you get to, I've never heard anyone else say that part. It takes like 3 or 4 days. It definitely, you feel that. So it's like, a weekend, you can tap into it to a degree, but when it's a week or 2 plus, you really start to feel like instincts start taking over, and you feel like primal almost. And there's a lot of technical stuff you got to do with the boat and logistically, and there's technology out there that you got to make it possible. But it is this survival is always in the front of mind. It's like it's cleansing, man. It's like you unzip your civilized self and walk out of that suit, and now you're the real Jerome, out there. You know what I'm saying?
A more authentic, organic person than, and I find more and more in the last few trips that I've done, even shorter ones where I'm just sailing from up here to Maine or something like that, which takes 2 weeks or so. After a couple of days of not being inundated by, telephone screens and computers and all that stuff, because there's just such a overwhelming injection of imagery and sound bites and things like that once that's cut off, at first you sort of feel like, well, this is so boring out here in the trees and with the sky. And then you sort of get used to that low level of input. And I think that's when you stop getting distracted by all that other stuff, which is usually just somebody trying to sell you something.
Totally. That's all it is.
And then all of a sudden you start thinking about life, and you start thinking about, what's around you and your environment and all that. And that, at the end of the day, at least in my own opinion, that's far more fulfilling than
endlessly scrolling. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Dude,
just like ding.
It's something I've been thinking about a lot. This is probably the most normal we've ever lived, my wife and I. It's a house. It's in a neighborhood. I feel like so much of our energy, our money, and our time are spent fighting nature. Just because
trying to tame it.
Yeah, just because it's like, well, we gotta mow our grass. Well, shoot, we don't have grass. Like, well, we had to grow some. It's just dirt patches out there, and then it's endless because you kind of want to, but you don't really. I personally don't really want to do all these things all the time. But it's like, well, you got to keep the house cool because you can't let it get swampy. Mold starts growing. You know what I mean? It's like you have to do it. Once you get these things, you kind of, there's a certain level of maintenance that's just required to keep it from costing you more in the long run. But even then, just the maintenance, it's just like we spend so much time versus like in a tent, for instance, on a bike trip somewhere. You're just kind of, you put up the tent. There's not a whole lot you can do about the cold or the heat.
Check the sleeping bag for spiders.
It's just like, it's minimal about it. Yeah. It's like just clear survival. It's not all the layers on top of it. But the boat, being out on the sailboat, it feels like there is a lot to keep up with.
Well, definitely. Also, because you're using it for your mode of transportation.
Yeah.
You can go out. There was a guy a year or two ago who floated across the Atlantic in a barrel. Pretty high tech one, but he had no sails. He's a French guy. And,
what did he do?
He just hooked into the current, and it took him down. I can't remember where he left from. Maybe the Canaries or something like that. You could definitely.
I gotta write this down. That's great.
But I think it took him maybe like 80 something days. You'd have to check it out, but and he made it to the Caribbean, and basically he was just bobbing, and you can do that, and then things obviously are way more simple. But
how did he eat? How did he?
He just packed this thing. I'm sure the barrel was, again, as big as this table. So
it's had to be like a car or something.
It's something like that, yeah. But
he just floated out there.
He just floated, sort of like the Kon-Tiki tour, that balsa wood raft or whatever they made. And that, I mean, I think they had a sail on that one. So this goes just straight up with the current.
And there's not a lot to run into.
No, you're more concerned about getting run over out there. I mean, the big ships and all that sort of stuff. They're not going to be able to see it, but you can have AIS, the automatic identification system, and that's sending your position out, and the ships will see that if they're paying attention. So
you're like, there's a boat over there. I don't see it.
I don't see one. Is this a glitch?
I see a fridge out there. Well, dude, let me ask you about that circumnavigation again. Not the circumnavigation, but the figure 8 around the Northwest Passage and Antarctica. What made you not want to just turn around and go the other way? Do it backwards? Would that have been possible?
I got a message from Randall Reeves about that, and he said, hey, you could probably do it backwards. And the only problem I had with that, one, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to go and do this trip and sort of hinge it on the fact that maybe they would let me go through at the end, in a year from now, so to speak. The other thing was that fuel bladder. So the big one that I had, 170 gallons in, that was like an actual bladder instead of like a stainless steel fuel tank. Okay. And I was worried about that thing popping because if it had ruptured, I'd literally have so much fuel floating around in my boat. I had no plan to be able to deal with that besides pumping it overboard, which I definitely did not want to have to do. And it's sort of the reason I went ahead with that. One, it was cost effective, but two, I figured I was going to be in the Northwest Passage within a month of leaving, and I would have burnt through all of that fuel by the time I got through. So I was like, oh, okay, so I'll do that, get rid of the fuel, get back to my normal weight on the boat, and then sail around the world after that. And doing it the other way, I mean, there's just no way that fuel bladder would have stood the test of time. And I worried about it constantly when I was in bad weather, because I got hit by a couple little systems as I was trying to get south. And, the boat's lurching up and down, and I'm looking at this bladder because I could just see one side of it coming out from the bunk, and this whole thing's like moving. And all I could think of is the wrong bit of friction, or like maybe a loose screw or something gets underneath it. Because if it starts leaking, I mean, I was in trouble. It would have been really bad. That was sort of my worst nightmare. And I'd pull the whole structure apart and check it. And, unfortunately I had spilled a little bit when I was filling it up. So, and diesel it's sort of an oily fuel. So I was always finding more of it, and it's pink. So it has this dye in it. And so I'd see like the boat would heel over on one way and I wouldn't see anything. And then like a couple days later, I'd heel over on the other way. And then all of a sudden there'd be a little pool. And I'm like, oh no, it's leaking.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, here we go. So it was this total,
would you try to solve that if
challenge.
You did it again?
Yeah,
use barrels or something. I don't know.
See, the problem was space, because having it be sort of a pliable, bladder made it fit into that spot really well. And I built the bunk over the top of it, so it was pretty well contained. I mean, had I gotten in a bad storm and the boat got flipped over, it just weighs too much. I think it weighed about 1,200 pounds. So it's risky. And, if I had a huge budget, yeah, you could probably build a little tank in there and affix it basically to the boat. But I don't know. One of the things I worry about is that now Canada is probably going to, and rightfully so, because that passage is in their territory. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to start regulating it like really seriously, trying to make sure. It used to be like the Wild West. You could just go up there and sometimes you check in and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm going through, and they sort of keep an eye on you, but it was sort of like whoever wants to go for it. Now I think it's going to be massive amounts of equipment that you need, permitting, all that stuff. I think the days of just heading up on a big adventure up there are pretty much over. You've got to you've really got to be able to show that you've got the right boat, the right number of people, all that sort of stuff to go through there. And in a lot of ways, I guess I agree with it just because it is such a sensitive, natural area. The last thing you need is some idiot with 250 gallons of diesel going up there. And then all of a sudden his thing explodes and he's going to pump it all overboard. It's like, wow,
or he goes miss, worst case scenario, just, you don't know. And you got to go check it out, spend money on rescue crews and
well, and I had to show them, an insurance policy that had like $1 million coverage for search and rescue. And so there were already a couple of things that I had to have just to be able to be allowed up there. But I have a feeling, in the future, I think they're not gonna open it this year, from what I'm told. So I don't know, but it's all right. I'd actually almost rather have it that way, because then I would know I would never attempt that one again. I could just move on. It's a clean break.
Well, there's nothing I can do about it.
Exactly.
There's nothing I can do about it.
They're not letting us yahoos go up there anymore, so that's fine.
Oh my gosh.
But I'll tell you, to have, just for the beginning, to have the trip sort of end that way, I guess it could have been way worse. Obviously I could have sank, or I could have just mentally been like, no, I'm too afraid, I can't do this, and made the decision myself. And that's one of my biggest fears always going into any type of adventure, is like knowing that there is that possibility where I might not be up to the task. And so to actually just be told by somebody else that I can't do it anymore, it was, I don't want to say like a get out of jail free card, but
makes it easier.
It made it a little easier. Yeah. But I didn't even go and look back, and I still haven't to this day, to find out what the ice conditions were. Because some years you can go up there, you can have all the prep in the world, but the ice doesn't open up.
Right.
And you just got to turn around. Yeah. And I don't even want to know.
What does it look like when the ice isn't opened up? I mean, does it just slowly start getting more and more ice, or is it a wall? Do you know?
Well, yeah, it's basically, you get pack ice. There's like surface ice that sort of floats around, and when the wind blows, all of a sudden it'll move all of it and just jam up one section. And then there's older ice, which is super thick, which isn't going anywhere. And what's happening now, from what I'm told, is that basically you'll get this situation where the ice you'll have a warm year and it'll undercut a bunch, and you'll have a year where it's kind of easier to get through, but so much of the undercutting has happened. The next year, a big chunk of it falls off, and even though it's hotter than it's ever been, all that loose ice jams the Northwest Passage up. So typically what they say now is that you have, I think, 2 bad years and then 1 good year. Or no, it's something like that. They say it comes in 2s at this point, where you get really warm temperatures, it's wide open, but then all of a sudden it's like the amount of floating ice builds up to a point where it lets go, and then all of a sudden jams everything up. Because a lot of those passages in there, it's an archipelago, so there's some places where, there's land right over there, there's land right over there, and all this ice is getting chalked up and stuck in places and all that. I mean, my biggest fear, besides being caught in moving ice and basically crushed, was to be in that situation where there's a lot of floating ice, and all of a sudden a big gale comes in, and now you're in floating ice in 20-foot waves. I mean, that would be terrifying. And I think those are the conditions that you can find way up in the Labrador Sea, way north and near Greenland. And then also once you get on the other side in the Beaufort Sea, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but above Alaska. Yeah. And I mean, just thinking about, a wave, it's scary enough to think about a crashing wave hitting the boat. But if you're putting 2-ton blocks of ice inside of that wave, that's a hellish nightmare. I don't ever.
It's like artillery hitting the boat.
And there's just no way you can survive that in a small fiberglass boat. It's just impossible.
What would you do? Well, I mean,
that's one where you just try and make peace with things. I mean, there's just no way to survive that sort of stuff. So obviously, I mean, if you knew it was coming, you would try and position yourself in a place where you would because there's a lot of coves and things like that you can sort of duck into. So you try and do that, but that ice is sort of a strange thing, the way it moves, and it's affected by a lot of stuff and the power of it. I mean, if you have 50 miles of ice all moving in one direction, nothing literally will stop it. I mean, if it starts piling up over onto the landmass, it'll start to like scrape it away. It's like a mini glacier. So
yeah, wow,
it's a gnarly place. The more I think about it, the less I think I would ever want to do that.
How do you feel if you wouldn't have been turned around by the government? Do you feel like
I would have made it?
Or not made it? There's a lot ahead, but did you feel like you on your own would have continued?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How were you feeling?
I was feeling good. I mean, I was definitely pretty down about the weather as far as just being in fog, never ending fog. It wears on you psychologically, or at least it does to me, where you just don't feel very good. Everything's because your world is just so small at that point. You just, you want to see the sun, you want to see the stars. But one of the cool things that was actually bringing my spirits up was as I got further north, it would start to get dark at maybe 10 o'clock at night. But by about 2:30 in the morning, the sun was, or it was at least becoming light again. So I was getting closer to that 24 hours of sunlight. And I was really excited about seeing that. I've always wanted to experience it. And it was getting closer and closer. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be great. It's literally going to be light all day and all night. And unfortunately, I had to turn around before I got way up there to experience it.
And no chance to see like the northern lights.
Nah, yeah. Well, and talking with Matt Rutherford, who was the first person to solo nonstop around the Americas, he did it in 2011, 2012, and he said the further north you get, the worse it gets. The fog, just because you've got all this cold air, and then you've got the moisture coming off of the sea, and it just is a perfect cocktail for just thick fog. Yeah. So
jeez, man, unreal.
It's like a different world up there.
What were you looking forward to the most that you didn't get to see on that experience? Any place you had researched or part of the route that you really wanted to get to see?
I was definitely planning on, as I headed further south in the Pacific, I wanted to do a flyby of Easter Island. And, pick the right side where I could see the actual statues because they all face the water. I thought that would be pretty cool just to sort of sail past and envision myself on, some tall ship back in like 1820, being like, what is that? I don't think we should stop there, guys. Yeah. But no, I was hoping to be able to actually see Cape Horn because I missed it on the first one. I passed it through the night. But mostly I was really excited about getting past the Aleutian Islands into the Pacific Ocean after the Northwest Passage. And that would have only been, 3 months into the trip. So the trip was going to be a year, and it would have been sort of like a brand new start because then I was all open ocean, basically in very familiar waters, so to speak. And I was looking forward to that, just being able to accomplish the Northwest Passage and then have this whole world to go around.
Get the hard part done.
Yeah,
it seemed like.
And I wouldn't say too much that it's the hard part because the Southern Ocean is a whole different beast, but it was the most complicated part and the most questionable. I think that's the best way to put it because there was, there's so many factors. The ice, the government, the regulations, the pandemic, all that stuff were factoring into whether or not I'd get through that. And the engine too. I mean, when I go ocean sailing, if the engine dies, so be it. It's fine. I have no problem with that. In the Northwest Passage, if your engine dies, you're pretty much out of luck at that point.
You're rowing the boat.
Yeah, and my boat weighs way too much to row.
So you're not rowing the boat.
So not rowing that boat. But
man.
Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty strange. But like I said, it left me in this weird place of this limbo, stuck in the middle of the ocean and just trying to protect myself from the hurricanes. And so, as I got further south, it kind of was nice because the weather got a lot better. And once I got to the Azores, things sort of calmed down. There's a big high pressure system called the Azores High. It just sits out there and it produces really calm wind, calm seas. And I had all this fuel that I wanted to sort of get rid of, so I was happy to motor. And yeah, it was beautiful. I had my stars at night and it was warm, but at the same time, I was just starting to deal with the fact that, I'd spent every penny that I had. The trip was definitely not going to go according to plan, and I didn't know what to do at that point. So it became a very psychological game that I was playing, and I'm by myself, obviously. So you're just, the gears were just turning and turning, and I'd be going up and down. One night I'd be like, all right, I'm going around again. This is the plan. I got to do it. And then the next night I'd be like, oh my God, I just want to stop. Maybe I should just sail to the Azores and just stop there. But at the same time, there were so many regulations and so many countries that weren't letting people in. So that compounded the sort of mental problems I was having, because all of a sudden I felt like, wow, I'm really stuck out here because nobody will even let me in their countries. And
how are you finding, what is your way of finding out that news?
I was just being able to text people from my little Garmin InReach. So I could, text buddies and stuff, and they would check. We were looking at a marina in the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa in case a big tropical wave, which is basically the beginning of a hurricane, came right off the coast. I could sort of duck in there, and he couldn't get a hold. He said it looked like I probably could have gone in there, but the marinas were all closed up and there weren't really a lot of options. It would have been a fiasco for sure to try and pull in there. So
can you just go, so driving around here, there's all these coves and there's marinas, but then we'll see this like cove with 20 boats scattered around, just kind of anchored.
Yeah.
Can you just go do that? So like, what are the rules with that?
Well, so internationally, and I'm not by any means like a maritime lawyer or anything, but under maritime law, I do believe that if you are in trouble, like your boat is sinking or you're having medical issues or anything like that, I believe you can just pull straight into any place and at least anchor. Normally you would pull in and you would announce that you're coming in once you're a certain distance away, like 3 miles or something. And then you go check in through customs. You have to go through all that. And then you get clearance to stay in the country. But if you're sheltering from a storm or something like that, yeah, I mean, typically they won't, if you just go and anchor somewhere, put up your little yellow flag that says quarantined, then you should be good to stay for at least a couple of days. I believe. Don't quote me on that, people. Right. I don't need anybody saying Jerome said I could.
Jerome.
But I've sailed through territorial waters a lot, and I'm just passing by. But I know in the Caribbean, when other people cruise and do the island chains, sometimes they will, instead of actually checking into a country, they'll just anchor there for the night and then start sailing the next day. So I know people that have done it, and it seems to be pretty much okay and acceptable.
Wow. What is like say you're out, say you on the adventure itself, on the circumnavigation, or just a normal day when you're crossing the Atlantic back to the Azores, what does a typical day look like from waking up in the morning to going to bed? Like, is it usually kind of the similar things, or is it always something pretty different?
It gets very routine. I mean, in certain segments.
Yeah.
Because there's certain things you have to do. You always have to do your boat checks in the mornings. You always have to do your navigation and your position at noon.
And what is all that? What is boat checks?
It's just basically taking a look around the equipment. Like at the end of the day, when you get off the bike the next morning when you're about to do 100 miles, you check over the brakes and things like that and the chain, right? I mean,
maybe.
A little squirt of WD-40 maybe.
I'm not going to sink into the ocean. So
right, no,
I'd be like, I got a flat.
So basically I just look at, looking for any signs of something chafing through, wearing through. Typically on a boat, your ears are going to come in handy more than anything, because you're going to hear sounds change. Like boats get into this rhythm and everything sounds the same and everything moves the same, and you sort of,
it's like a car.
Yeah, it's all good. But then all of a sudden you start hearing like tink, 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 and you got to find out what that is, because something has gone wrong. Something has changed. And so I look at all the wires, I look at the sails that are up. You get a real sense, at least on my boat, that everything's pretty much okay. I've made it a point to make my boat as simple as possible, foregoing all the fancy stuff. And
you look at a sailboat, for someone that doesn't know what they're doing. I go to, there's a marina right next to our house. Mm-hmm. We go down there all the time just to walk up and down the docks.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
They're beautiful, but it's also it's like looking at the inside of a computer. To me, where I'm like, or like the inside of an electrical panel or something I don't understand. And I'm like,
yeah,
look at all these pulleys and ropes, and it's just so much. Is it really that?
No, it's not that bad. I would definitely think I could teach you if we spent one day on a boat. I feel like you'd feel pretty comfortable not only knowing what you're looking at, but also how it works, and then also being able to sail it. That's all.
No way.
It would just take one day.
One day to sail?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I taught sailing for decades, so there's,
I've never sailed.
Oh, man. Well, hey, you know what? If I end up scooting down here again before I head up to Maine,
hey, let me know.
We can go rent. Awesome. There are places they rent boats.
They rent right down by our house. But it's crazy. You look at all these boats, and after talking to you specifically, we've had other sailors on the show, but you talking with you, I'm looking at these boats and talking to my wife and my son, and I'm like, you can just, these can take you anywhere. That's, I mean, just like a car can or a bike can, but like these on the water, it's just blows my mind. These people could just go out to that ocean and do anything, you know?
Well, it's that ultimate like romantic dream of sail off into the sunset to some tropical paradise. And it's awesome. True. That's, you have to go through quite a bit to get there, but you're gonna get there. It's a great feeling, and I love it. I thought for sure when I got back I was gonna have to sell the boat because I was dead broke, and I was just like, oh no, what am I gonna do? But luckily I've been able to put together enough just to be able to maintain it. So I don't know what'll happen in the future, but I definitely didn't want to, because that boat has become sort of part of me, but it's my home, and it's sort of like, in some ways it's my escape pod. Like if I ever just say, you know what, I need to just disappear for a couple of months, I could easily set sail tomorrow and just head out into the Atlantic and, go and sort of not drift around, but sail comfortably, out in the middle of the ocean for a while.
It's unbelievable ability to just say you can do that.
Disappear into the biggest expanses on the planet.
It's terrifying, man. It's like,
but and it's funny because you say that, and when you have a couple adventures sitting down, it's always funny because some things, like literally riding a bicycle on the edge of a road, that terrifies me. I think of that street out there is more dangerous than any ocean ever could be. At least statistically, your chances of some idiot plowing into you. And you do that. Yeah. How long is that trip from Alaska? Is that 5,000 miles?
Yeah, that was 5,300.
And that's all on roads?
Mostly, yeah. There was a couple dirt sections, but mostly
roads. Did you ever get hit by a car?
No. Ended up doing 5 other cross-country rides.
And you've never been hit?
This summer I got hit.
Oh, do tell.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoy the podcast and want to support it, just go to podbean.com and you can become a patron and keep the show on the air. Also, if you like the music at the beginning, the album is called Deep Teal, and the artist is Adrian Edson. It's available on Amazon Music. And if you want the full story of the trip around the world, the book, the Kindle book, and the audiobook can all be found on Amazon.com. Sailing into Oblivion, the solo nonstop voyage of the Mighty Sparrow. Fair winds and following seas.